Hello and welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you how to make a Walking Dead style intro for the new season. You're going to get a video that looks just about like this, and it shouldn't even take too long. Most of the movement will be procedural, so you can adjust it to look just how you want it to. So to start off with, make a new scene in Blender. We're going to want to get this scene looking about right in terms of the lighting first, so that we can adjust everything else to look right. Get rid of the light and get rid of the default cube, and then change the world colour to a sort of bright yellow. Now make a UV sphere, set its shade smooth and scale it down, and then make it a new material with the emission type, and up the strength. Change your render engine to EV, and turn on bloom so that you can see what it looks like. For the bloom, I want to increase the intensity, but the highest one isn't too much. To make it even higher, you can just type in the number you want, so I want a value of about 2, and then increase the threshold slightly. Now I'm going to set up the camera. Just position it about where you want and then press Ctrl, Alt and then 0 on the numpad and it'll jump. Press N to bring up the side panel, view and then lock camera to view, and you can move it around just by panning. Now we need to set up the tree. I've downloaded the images I want into this folder here, including a PNG of a dead tree. To bring it into Blender, you'll need the images as planes add-on enabled, and once it's enabled you can just press Shift A, image, and then import images as planes. Navigate to your folder and then choose the dead tree. Scale it up, and you can see that it's worked as a PNG and you can see through it. Position it about where you want, use the numpad so that you can see where the bottom of it is if you need to. And now we can move the sphere so it looks a bit more like a sun. Now to put the crows on the tree. To do this I'm going to use a particle system, but to make it so that the crows only appear on the branches, we're going to need to set up some vertex groups first. Go to modifiers and add a subdivision surface modifier, change the levels to 6 and then change it to simple, and now apply. Now you've got all these different vertices. 3 on the numpad to go to the right view. Press tab to go into edit mode and Alt A to deselect everything, and then press C and you can use a brush to select all of the vertices that you want the crows to appear on. If you use the middle mouse wheel instead of the left click, then you can deselect vertices. So I'm going to deselect all these bottom ones because we don't want any crows appearing there. Once you've set that up, go to the vertex tab and under vertex groups make a new one. Rename it to sitting crows and then hit assign. Now we can make a particle system. Go to the particles tab, make a new one and set it to hair. Reduce the number to something like 50, and then under vertex groups and density choose the sitting crows one so that the hair will only appear on the correct branches. Now we need the actual crows to render, so I'm going to do the Shift A and then images as planes again, and then select the crows that I've downloaded. You can just get these from Google Images, but make sure they're a PNG with the alpha so that you can get the transparency you need. Select all 3 of the sitting ones. I like to use 3 because it's just enough to add variety. You can tell that there are multiple crows there, but it's not too many that you have to find loads of pictures yourself. Import images as planes, and they're all here. Just move these well out of the scene so you won't see them on the camera. And now on the right, make a new collection, call it sitting crows, and then drag those crows in there. To make even more variety from just the same pictures, you can duplicate those, set the scaling type to individual origins, and then scale them on the y-axis -1 so that you have them facing both ways. Now they're all in a collection, you can select the tree again, and then under render, change the type from path to collection, and choose that collection, so that each object will be one of these crows. Select object rotation so that they're all facing the right way, and you see that they're all facing upwards rather than left and right. So select all of the crows in the collection, press R for rotate, and then X, and then 90. And you'll see that they're all facing the right way now. They're all a bit too big, so select it again, under scale, just change that to something a bit smaller. You can add a little bit of variety as well in the size, and if you want more you can just change the number. So now we've got the crows, we need to set up where they're going to go on what frame. So after the start we're going to have a little bit of panning around, and then about frame 60 we want them to all disappear and turn into leaves. So on frame 60 I'm going to select the scale field and press I while hovering over it to add a keyframe, and then on frame about 65, type 0, and then insert another keyframe in scale. So now when you go past frame 60, they'll all disappear. Now we want to create a new particle system for the leaves. I'll just rename this one. Set it up the same with the hair. I'm actually just going to use the same vertex group as the crows because it's just selecting branches. Give it a lot less, and then I'm going to import my image of just some leaves. I'll do the same thing of moving it out of the way. Under render, this time it's just an object. Select the tree leaves. Select object rotation. If we move past that keyframe it'll get rid of the crows and you can see the real size. And then under render, increase the size. You can also check advanced rotation and then change the way that it's rotated if you want. Global X has them facing the right way, and then you can add a bit of random to give them some actual depth. You can still use all the controls to change the emission and the size. I find that this looks about right. Now we want to make sure that this works with the crows, so when the crows disappear, we want the leaves to appear. So on frame 60, I'm going to change the scale to 0, the opposite of the way the crows are going. And then as the crows disappear, maybe frame 70, so it's a little bit later, change the size to what we wanted, about 0.1. And then insert another keyframe by pressing I. Now when we play the animation, our crows will disappear and the leaves will appear. If you want them to be a little bit bigger, all you've got to do is go to that last keyframe, change the size, say 0.15, and then press I again to make it a new one. If we watch this from the camera view, it's looking good already. So now we want to set up the camera a little bit. I'm going to press N, do camera to view, and then just put it way in close so that we're getting that nice close up at the start of the animation. Press I, location, rotation and scale, and make sure you've got the camera selected. And then play the animation, maybe frame 38, somewhere around, still close to the start. Move it around, do the same thing. And then when it gets to frame 60, or just before, set a keyframe, move it away so you're getting that wide angle shot, put it a few frames after, and then set another keyframe. Now we'll do that fast pan as the leaves grow. Maybe set another one about here, but only a slight movement, so that it doesn't stop so suddenly. So now the camera's looking around, doing the close-up at the start, and then it pans away. So now I've got two sets of shaking, one here and one here. You can change the strength if you want to make it shake further when it happens. That looks good. So now we need to work on some of the landscape. Go back to the Layout tab, undo Lock Camera to View, and then make a mesh. Just make a simple plane, rotate it 90 degrees, scale it on the Y-axis, then go into Edit mode, add a bunch of loop cuts so that they're roughly square along the side. This just works better for subdividing. At the moment it's in the sitting crows group, so it's going to be duplicated on the tree, so just move it out of there, we don't want that to happen. Now you can select all of it, subdivide, in the number of cuts, set it to something quite big, say 25, maybe even 50. Now we can select any one of these vertices along the top, press O to go into proportional editing and change it to random, and then we can move them and get this sort of landscape look. You only want to move it very slightly, so I hold shift to get a more gradual look. Select a few vertices, do the same thing, then change it from random to smooth, and just manipulate the landscape a bit to make it look more realistic. Now we want to press G and X to move this one just in front of the tree, so this one's going to be close to the camera. Create a material for it and make it a nice dark brown, almost black is what you really want. Duplicate it and move it on the X-axis behind. Scale on the Y-axis and then -1 to sort of flip it horizontally. Just manipulate it a bit so it looks however you want, it's up to your preference. Now I'm going to add some mist. To do this, I'm not going to do anything fancy, I'm not going to use volumetrics or anything, it'll take a long time to render, especially on worse machines. So instead, I'm just going to do an images as planes as I have for the rest, but this time I'm using a PNG of some mist. Rotate it 180 degrees so it's facing up, scale it way up, and then you can just put it between each section. So you put it at the front like this, put it at the back, and already you've got some mist that looks pretty realistic, very easy, and it's not intensive on your computer at all. So now when we view our animation, you can see it all happening, all looking quite realistic, with mist and a background. So now we're going to go into the compositor and make this look a bit more how we want. To do this, just make sure you render one frame. You only need one, but it's just as a reference when you're in the compositor. Go into the Compositing tab and make sure you check Use Node so you can actually use it. If you press Ctrl, Shift, and then click Render Layers, you'll get this Viewer node so you can see it in the background, and then go to View on the right and Fit, you can see it here. And what we're going to do to get it looking a bit more like the original is, first of all, we're going to really reduce the saturation. Take it way down like that. Then I'm going to add an RGB curves. Increase the contrast quite heavily. So you can see it's quite a difference from there, but it looks a lot more like the original. For the camera, I'm going to include depth of field. This is just going to make it look a bit more realistic. Set it to the right distance, which is about 50 meters, and then you can reduce the f-stop. You'll notice if you render a frame, it's not actually including the compositor look. The reason for this is we haven't linked up the actual composite output. Just control and right click, and then you can break that link. And then instead of this going into the viewer, make sure it goes into the composite node. Now if you render an image, pressing F12, it will render and then automatically composite, so we get the look that we want. Now what we want to do is add all the crows in the sky. For this, I'm going to include a plane, rotate it, move it, go into edit mode and then use Ctrl R to add a couple of loop cuts, Alt to select them, and then just scale it so it's a little bit more of a circle. Then add a modifier, change it to subdivision and simple, increase the subdivision so it has a lot more vertices. Now we can make a hair emitter the same way we did on the tree. Reduce the number again, maybe 150, and then we're going to include the images of the flying crows instead of the sitting down ones. Include those, move them over to the left, do the same with a new collection, change this one to flying crows, and then move them into the right one. Do the same little trick of duplicating them and then scaling them the opposite way so that you get them flying every way. Now select the plane, under render again, change it to collection and select the flying crows. Again, select object rotation. I'm just going to disable the camera field of view for the moment. You can see they're rotated the wrong way again, so just do the same thing we did. Select them all, rotate them, and now they're looking right. This blob is still looking a little bit too square, so just disable proportional editing, move it around, make it look about how you want. That looks good. And at the moment you can still see the square behind it. So in here, make sure that you have show emitter disabled. Now if we render out another image, we've got a bunch of crows in the sky. They look a bit too dark at the moment, which is because they're quite close to the camera, so if we move them away from the camera but scale them up, you get about the same size look of crows, but they're a little bit less intrusive in the final render. You can also just add a little bit more geometry to this if you want to make it look slightly less unrealistic. Just move it around so it's a bit more of an organic shape. Now we need to set where this swarm of crows is going to be. On about frame 50, we want it scaled way down and then moved under here, and then set a keyframe for the location and scale. We're going to set the same keyframe just before here, and then as it does the quick pan out, we want the crows to be full size and back where they're supposed to be, over here. Move them there and set the keyframe, and now they'll jump out like that. So now we want to duplicate this, delete its location and scale keyframes because at the moment they're going to be the same as the old one, and then set it to the new one. Press S, Y and -1 to rotate it. Change the look, make it the right size you want, maybe a bit bigger on this side, and then make sure you add the keyframe again. Now when it goes through that change, both the birds will come out. Now if you render a frame, you'll see that we're pretty much done. Looks like the original animation. The birds are all flying out, and the animation's happening with the tree. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If it's helped you out, please consider sharing it with anyone you think might find it useful. Thanks for watching.